Howard's art scene.
Jackie Winsor, process, passion, and perfection.
How my artwork has developed and where my interest in it is as a kind of a way of revealing things to myself. It's about a sort of inner journey that has these outer manifestations, and if that in turn affects anything out and around me, well, fine, but actually I'm much more interested in the fact that it has that effect on me and that it has the capacity to alter something within myself.
Jackie Winsor's studio, located in this building in New York City's Soho district, could be considered an avant-garde laboratory experimenting with visual art. Winsor's unusual working method and visual byproducts have established her as an important artist and innovator on the forefront of valuable artistic achievement.
One of the things I learned early on in my art making is that you follow the work. The work takes you someplace and you follow it. And so, if anything, I'd say that early on, one of the things that I thought I could do is I could direct it. I could be the navigator. I could be the one who did it. And what happened is that things would stop and I would have to repeat them or take a couple years to catch up to where I had been before. And so what I've learned over a period of time is what it's about, to some degree, is very trying to stay in tune to what's going on in the work, where you are on that level, and following it. And so it seems to me, the art part of it for me, like there's the construction of it, but part of it is sort of being able to keep your attention sensitive and subtle enough so you actually know where the work is going, or you know the range of where it's going, and when it's going right, it works. What's correct is really what you make up as being correct for yourself. And all the things that we function in the community, like I function in a very kind of very specific art community. And if you go out to the community at large, you know, that focus that exists there simply isn't out there in the public at large. However, in my chosen spot, it is what's important to me. And similarly, what's important for some other artist or group of artists, and what's important for me as a person, it's simply my own choosing, and it hardly makes any difference. There's going to be a place over there where it's correct, and there's going to be a place over here where it's not correct. And where it truly is correct is whether it sits well in your own experience, and whether you feel like that your life is worthwhile, and that you get to use it up before you turn it in.
Jackie Winsor usually works with a small band of assistants in a marathon, non-stop, furious pace of creation lasting sometimes in excess of more than 50 continuous working hours. The experience of the creation and how it changes Jackie's perception of herself and the world as her reality is the primary focus of her art.
Well, you know, I'm a sculptor, and I make all these objects, and somehow the idea of altering something or being able to shift it, or how long it actually takes to shift something, or whether it actually ever does, interests me a lot, and whether that's possible as yourself, as your own creation in a way, whether it's possible to move your own form or move your own content. So that's what interests me, whether I can actually experience within myself that I have moved some part of my consciousness. In earlier pieces, one of the things that I was interested in, I made these pieces that were wrapping rope, and I made a piece where the kind of corners of a square were about this big around, and they stood up and made huge mounds of rope. And what the work seemed to do is to pull energy from around it. It seems to me, although it doesn't sound huge in saying, it seems huge in one's experience to be able to attain some amount of quietness in your heart, in your life. And it seems to me that quietness that you attain is sort of a door to an inner life. And I think in some way that's what I'm interested in, is like doorways. Earlier pieces as well, what I was interested in there was creating a force or unknown or some energy that interacted with the form or the object, and I use fire and things like that. And what I have worked with most recently is finding parallels for like the quality of the fire in the piece. And so I've been working with color, not as sort of illusion or sumptuous, which it very often carries that with it, but with the kind of impact, the quality of impact. And so the pieces that, the most recent pieces of those containers, is they're containers holding the presence of red or the presence of blue. And through like saturating, it's like the kind of saturation of a color, the absolute physicalness of a color sitting there.
Jackie Winsor understands the aesthetics of creation intimately. However, she also has experimented with her own personal version of destruction through the use of art. Can destruction be a form of creation?
I got explosive experts, concrete experts, plastics experts, and I tried in some way to make the unknown as known as I could, to know what the relationship between them would be, so that, I guess I did what everybody does. I want to make the unknown known, and yet on the other hand, what I asked for was to have the unknown in my piece. So I went out on the day that I had hired a explosives expert to explode the piece with me, and he had subcontracted it out to yet someone else, and we had discussed what we were going to do a lot. What we were going to do is to use like a grenade in it, or make an implosion, which would cause the walls to crumble on the interior of the piece. And instead, what happened is I got exactly what I asked for. They used exactly the reverse kind of explosive, high impact explosive, and what they did is they exploded the structure of the piece, and so they exploded it 5 times. The last thing I heard before they did it the 5th time is, "We'll get it this time," and whoom, the piece just blew, pieces blew 30 feet away, big couple 100-pound pieces. And I got what I asked for. It didn't look like what I had in mind. And so I got the unknown. Along with getting the unknown, even though the framework was trying to know it, I got the unknown. But what I got along with it is the metaphors that come along with using explosives. I just felt like I had been blown apart myself. I mean, I had spent close to a half a year working on that piece. It was 5 minutes, it was gone. And I also sort of felt like I instantly knew what war was about. instantly knew like the scale of the violence that's involved. Instantly knew like the impersonal aspect of it. Is I instantly knew the scale of the energy that was involved. The scale of the energy was huge. What I was interested in was to see not only what happens in the pieces over here, but to see what happens in my life in relationship to it. I felt like my whole outer protection was gone. I felt like my whole veneer was missing, and I felt raw and exposed to everything. I couldn't see people for days. I stayed inside. I looked at this thing, and I just felt as raw and vulnerable as one ever gets to. I actually felt like there was a part of me that had died along with this piece. It seems to me that art doesn't really evolve anywhere. What seems to evolve, or what seems to have change in it, is culture, and art seems to mirror what happens in the culture. But it seems to me that art making is an attempt to connect your finiteness with a kind of infiniteness, your infiniteness, or a greater infiniteness, to bring them together, to ground it like lightning comes from negative and positive forces between clouds and earth, and they kind of connect somewhere in between. And it seems that's what you're trying to do, and it seems to me that's what you're always trying to do, and doesn't seem like that ever evolves. What people do is they make up their own ways of doing it, and those ways of doing it seem cloaked in the culture that they're born into. And so we have the trappings of our culture around us, but the art of it, rather than the disguise it's held in, seems that it doesn't go anywhere, and it's each individual in their life trying to figure out how to make that connection. It seems to me the artwork in the end is always what's important. It's important because it's the language that you've developed to give expression to those reaches of yourself that you've tried to make contact with. To the degree that I'm plunked in a culture, that's to the degree that interests me. Otherwise, I think what interests me a lot is to the degree that I can hone from it and learn more about that thing I spoke about that little kind of negative and positive forces connecting with each other, and having some experience in my life of the finite and the infinite coming together.
Jackie usually first creates a mold, as you have seen her, by using white foam core board and her glue gun. The mold is then cast and worked on by several people continually, sometimes for several days without sleep, until the piece is completely finished.
How I perceive my work is how I actually perceive everyone's work, and that's pretty much as a self-portrait. And some self-portraits look like how you might see me, and other self-portraits reflect other aspects rather than the physical veneer of people. One thing I think that has interested me as an undercurrent that's gone around that never really seemed to manifest thoroughly was these images of, I remember seeing this image of buildings in flame and figures in flame and all these sort of crisis-oriented imagery that seems like the manifestation of a inner crisis, much like dreams. If you have dreams of, you know, flaming cities or something, it's sort of some inner language of talking about yourself. They're not just like self-portraits of a certain stationary moment. I think they're like little stepping stones in a kind of journey. They're a portrait of that journey that you're taking, and in a way, some of the times they're leading you on the journey, and you're following, and other times you're leading and it's following. But the objects that I'm working with, in a way, are my mirrors for my life that goes along parallel with it. And so one of the things, along with making the work, that I pay a lot of attention to is what happens in my life parallel to those events of making the pieces. And so that's a lot of what motivates me, is to see the relationship between the two. You have the physical object that you've constructed and put a lot of time and attention on making, that has its metaphors constructed in it, and to see how those things then manifest in my life. One of the things that has interested me most consistently in the work is slowing down the physical relationship with the work, slowing down the mental relationship to the work, and creating as close as one can without it being flat, creating kind of stillness and a quiet, and have that quiet that is created there be something that that one is able to take from the piece. I've sort of thought of the pieces as being larger than their physical shape, and that when I make them, I consider the space around them part of the pieces. And in doing that, in having that kind of awareness of the pieces, and so I care for the space around it the same way I'm really careful with the pieces. And in doing that, it's sort of allow the pieces to open up. What you seem to be doing is constructing yourself larger than your experience of yourself. through going someplace that you've never been within yourself, you make your experience of yourself larger, and and that largeness comes closest to those early grand expectations. And even though it might take a while to do it, it's still moving, and it's working. There's no standstills or a feeling like it's abandoned you or whatever other people might talk about. If you follow the work, it keeps you going.
David Howard's Art Scene.